And welcome to Marriage and Money, a conversational podcast about personal financial topics aimed at improving conversations about money in your marriage so you can reach your dreams together. This is a weekly discussion brought to you by a seemingly financially incompatible couple bonded by the legal contract of marriage. My name is David, your favorite saver, and I'm joined today by the one person who can see right through me, Heather.
That's right. I can tell there's a desk right behind you.
Wait, but... Okay.
We'd love to hear from you. Please send us your questions or comments. You can email us at marriageandmoneypodcast@gmail.com or message us on Instagram at marriage.and.money.
We have a fantastic show planned for you today. Today, we are going to talk about being transparent in our marriage about our spending.
Well, let's just take a time out. I think it's being transparent about all money stuff, not just the spending. Okay. What if I want to hoard and save a bunch of money?
All right.
Let's not pick on our favorite spenders today.
That's fair. Okay, let's broaden it out to money in general. Let's just be transparent with our spouses about money, or spouse. I don't have
spouses. I was gonna say, how many spouses do you have?
I was talking about collectively as an audience. We have spouses.
Got it.
But
keep digging.
Yeah, I'm trying.
This is starting really well for you.
Oh gosh, this episode's already a disaster for me. So why is this an important topic for us? Well, I guess hiding. I probably don't need to tell this to you, but hiding spending, hiding money, hiding things in your marriage is going to cause problems. It doesn't have to be money. Hiding stuff in your marriage isn't a good thing. Would you agree?
This is very shocking news coming at you. I'm sure this is the first time anyone has ever heard this. That's
why we're your wise podcast sages,
That's right.
Because we have this insight that no one else has.
Coming at you that you've never heard. Yeah, I think this really goes for anything. So just the highlight there is hiding stuff from your spouse is bad.
Well, I guess that about wraps up the podcast for today. Thank you so much for joining.
Or spouses. Or hiding another spouse from your spouse.
Exactly. Oh, no. So this is a big deal because hiding money, hiding spending from your spouse especially hiding spending from your spouse, can get you into trouble. It can lead to getting into serious debt. It can make it harder for you to reach your goals together. And all this builds frustration. It builds resentment. It builds mistrust. It builds basically all these negative things that you don't want in your marriage are going to then start to develop. And ultimately, that can lead to divorce.
Yeah, and I think that if you are hiding money or anything, I think that that's really a symptom of bigger issues. Mm-hmm. I think hiding, there's a deeper problem or issue there that you need to unpack and understand why you're doing that kind of behavior.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because if you're hiding money, you're doing it for a reason. You either, maybe your spending is out of control and you're embarrassed by it and you don't want you don't want your spouse to be aware of that. Maybe you don't trust your spouse, or your spouse doesn't trust you, and for that reason you feel like you need to hide the cash or hide the spending, and so there's a trust problem there. There could be a fear of being rejected. Maybe you're spending money or on something that they don't necessarily agree with, and you don't want to have to run it by them, and they're going to say no, they're going to shut you down. You feel like they're always shutting you down, which is a problem. And then, I don't know, there one other thing that came to mind here is that I've heard that some people will stash money away, especially if they're in a bad relationship, as an escape plan. And I would say that again, like, okay, if you're stashing money away because you need an escape plan from your spouse, then you clearly have marriage problems. So I think basically these are all symptoms of a bigger issue. Hiding money, hiding spending is a symptom of a bigger issue.
Agree.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't think this podcast is for those people. If you need to get out of your marriage, you need to get out of marriage. This is for people that you want to work on your marriage. And...
Exactly. Yeah, we're not here to try to keep anybody in a marriage that's destructive and harmful or anything like that. So this is a problem for a lot of couples because I think couples don't always understand their spouse's feelings or thoughts about money. So
Right.
there could be this becomes an issue because there's a lack of understanding on what their spouse needs, and that need isn't being addressed. And anytime you have a situation where needs aren't being addressed, then those needs are going to be addressed in some other way. And oftentimes that other way can be harmful, it can be dysfunctional, and I would say this is one of those ways that dysfunction can surface.
Agreed. And I think a lot of the time you don't understand what your spouse is thinking or feeling about money. It's because you never talked about it, which I think is another reason.
Have we talked at all about the need to talk about money with your spouse on this podcast before?
Right? I think communication is probably the word we're using most on this podcast. But I think you need, a lot of people think you don't need to be open about it. Money is a private topic. You shouldn't speak openly about it. And I think this is really true because you spend your whole life learning to not talk about money. This is such a taboo topic. It's private, it's personal. You shouldn't talk about your salary or what you're making or anything. You learn that this is super private. And then all of a sudden you get married and you're expected to share 100% with your spouse. And depending on when you get married in life, that's a huge change. So it's hard to just switch a flip on this and be like, okay, something that I've been told my whole life I need to keep in. Now I have to be transparent. And I'm not saying that that's right, that we tell society you shouldn't be open and transparent just in general, but
that's how it is.
That's how it is, realistically. And so it is hard to all of a sudden just flip a switch and be like, okay, let me just lay out everything to you.
Right. Yeah, it's a big shift. And I think that gets at another point around how we don't really have examples of this. I mean, a lot of people don't have examples of other couples doing this, right? Because it's so private, because it's something we don't talk about, because it's something we don't share. And that's one of the things we're hoping to alleviate with these conversations is to bring some light to the fact of healthy discussions need to happen around this.
Right.
Around this. This is important.
And I think that's one of the best things you can do if you're a parent, to model this behavior to your kids, to have them see you and your spouse talking openly about money. I've heard recently from some people on a different podcast that they grew up with their parents openly talking about it. And it's like they have a very good, transparent way with money, and they're doing well. And so I think you as a parent, if you have children, this is a great change you can make for your children's life, to model this behavior of talking openly. I remember growing up, I feel like the conversations I did hear were mostly arguments from my parents, like when the credit card statement would come, or
and that can train you that money is a terrible thing to talk about because it always results in fights.
Right, exactly. And not that you aren't going to fight as a couple, and I think it's okay for kids to also see model proper arguing, and because you're not always
working
get
through
along.
things. Yeah,
but I do think that this is a great way to model that, hey, it's okay and you should talk about money, and change the story.
Exactly. And I think this becomes a problem at the core of it. To me, at least, it becomes a problem because there's ultimately a lack of trust.
Ooh, now you're getting spicy.
Oh, really? Spicy. Oh, I like spice. But and I mentioned this before, but trust is really at the root of this. Like, if you don't trust your spouse to make the right decisions with money, if you don't trust that your spouse has your best interests in mind, if you don't trust your spouse completely, then issues with money come up. And I'll admit, yes, there have been moments where I haven't trusted Heather, you completely with spending, and I'm sure there are instances where you haven't trusted me completely with my amount of saving. And I think that's where we have to have these conversations to get on the same page, to establish that trust, to build up, to maintain that trust.
Yeah, I did say it's spicy, but I do agree that it is true. I think it is hard to trust people, especially when it comes to money, and not even just your spouse, but people in general. Money is such a, I don't know, polarizing
Well,
topic.
you
It's
put so much time into, I
right.
mean, working for it. It's hard. It represents hard work. It represents hours and hours, years of work.
Right. And so it is. I think this is something that you really have to work on trusting people, but definitely your spouse.
And there's a spectrum on this, right? So it could just be a lack of not thinking you don't need to talk about it. But on the other end, it could be that someone is being very deliberate. So it could be an unintentional, I just don't want to talk about it. I'm going to avoid this. Or it could be, no, I'm intentionally and deliberately hiding money from my spouse, hiding spending from my spouse very intentionally. And so on that spectrum, I think you need to establish, okay, where is this situation at before you react in a certain way, before you lash out. Certainly don't lash out at your spouse when you're having these conversations. But just be aware that it might not be as intentional as you originally think it is.
I agree. And I think if you're questioning this or realizing you're not communicating, I think you need to you give your spouse the benefit of the doubt. Give them the benefit of the doubt that this is just, they didn't realize you shouldn't be talking about it, that it's not intentional and not deliberate. Give them the benefit. Maybe they just, again, they didn't see it modeled. They've never really talked about it and they just didn't know they should. And I think this is like any expectation in a marriage. And I think we've talked about this in previous episodes. It's, if you're not aligned on what the expectation is, if you think the expectation is we don't talk about this, then that's how you're going to behave. And so, for example, when we got married, I had this expectation that like the inside household chores were Heather's responsibilities and the outside household chores were David's. I have no idea where that came from. Maybe probably growing up, even though my mom did mow the lawn and stuff. But for some reason in my head, I just thought David's going to do the yard and I'll do the inside house. Very traditional, old school 60s behavior, right? And that was definitely not David's expectation.
And it's really funny because you're not a very traditional like 50s stay-at-home wife kind of girl either.
I know. I don't know where it came from, but it was just this expectation that I had, and I didn't even know it was there until all the arguments came. And it's like, why aren't you mowing the lawn? It's like, why aren't you helping? And so again, this is the same thing with talking about money. It's an expectation that either of you have of not talking about it or talking about it. And so you just need to verbalize that and make sure you're on the same page.
So we've talked a little bit about like the issues with hiding money or hiding spending, but what does this actually look like? How does this actually manifest itself? One of the examples that came to my mind is a great story about my grandma and how she would stash stuff away in her closet for months. Like, she didn't want to tell my grandpa about the stuff, and so she was known to buy stuff at the mall, throw it in the closet, and it would sit there for months, and then eventually she'd bring it out and say, my grandpa would ask, oh, what is that, something new? And she'd say, oh no, we've had it for months. Which was true. It just wasn't out. It just wasn't being used. And so
smart woman. No,
well,
I'm just kidding.
And the justification for doing that, of course, is that she would think, oh well, he never lets me buy new stuff. So therefore it's justified. Now, it's a cute story, it's a funny story, but I would say it's a little dysfunctional as well.
Yeah. And
I think we all have a little bit of that in our lives. Another thing that I've seen friends do is they have their own credit card, or I guess I'm not aware of a secret credit card, but I'm sure people have secret credit cards out there. And the justification for that, of having that individual credit card that your spouse doesn't see the statement of, or a secret credit card, I think that the justification is oftentimes, I need my freedom, I need my privacy, I don't want somebody else to tell me what I can and can't do. It's that lack of freedom that they're trying to go for, and they feel justified doing it. And then the third thing I was thinking of was just hiding money, like hiding cash in general. And the justification for this is that they feel like they need that security. They don't necessarily trust that the other spouse won't spend that money if it's sitting in the bank account, or they don't trust that they'll have access to it when they need it, or they're saying, well, my spouse is spending all this money, so I need to have money sitting for me as well. Again, it's a lack of trust here, and but with all of these examples that I'm pulling up, in each case, the person taking the action feels very justified. They feel like they are in the right for doing this. And I think that's an important thing to remember when you're looking at your marriage is, what am I doing that I might be making justifications for that I shouldn't?
No, that's a really good point. Again, it's about giving the person the benefit of the doubt, understanding why they're doing it. Because, again, this is a symptom, right? To your point, there's always a reason of why they're doing it. And so really understanding the why and what's making them feel that way.
Exactly. So how do we want to, if you want to change your marriage, if you want to start to implement more transparency in your marriage, I think we should talk about a few things that people could do in order to make that more a reality.
Right. So you've said this T word a lot in this episode we both have about lack of trust. So if there is a lack of trust, then you need to do something about that and try to create a trusting environment or culture. So it's time to do the trust fall exercise.
Okay. Stand up on the table. I'm back here.
That's right.
Let's hope I'm strong enough.
Just kidding. I love that. And to me, I mean, this is hard to do. Hopefully, you're able to work through this. But, trust is composed of two things. It's composed of character and it's composed of competency. So when you're doubting someone's character, you're doubting someone's competency, that's where you start to have issues. At least that's what we learn in the business world. So I'm trying to apply that to personal life because
it's fair.
I've run into this more so in business and in teams where there's a lack of trust. And so I think those are the two areas that you need to kind of look at and say, how do we build that trust again?
And so I think those are two great points. Communicating regularly in addition to trust is really important. We talked about the importance of communication earlier, and again, it seems to come up in every episode. Communication's critically important. You need to be having those budget discussions on a regular basis. You need to be dreaming together and having those shared goals. If you have those things in place, if you're talking about that on a regular basis, talking about money all the time like that, it's going to be normal. Like, you can't help but be transparent, and you're going to want to be transparent. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is such an easy concept. Well, of course you should talk about it. Like, communicate. It's such an easy button answer. But it is hard to actually implement and do consistently in your marriage, to your point. So you just need to practice it. You just need to be doing it, and then it will become natural. And I would say that we are probably weirdos. We are not the normal because we do talk a lot about money. Obviously, we're having a podcast on this topic. So we get that we are not your average Joe on this. But I do think people probably tend to go a lot the other way of not talking at all. So there's probably a happy medium here.
And I just want to remind you, Heather, like when we started doing this, when we started our budget, we didn't talk a lot about money. We talked about money, but not this much.
True.
And so it took us a while starting our budget. It took us several months of doing the budget, going through the pain of that. And it was painful at first before it became...
There were some tears.
There were.
From this girl.
So, we had a lot of conversations that didn't go well. And we worked through those conversations that didn't go well before it became a regular habit. So this isn't something we just stepped into and said, "Oh, this is easy. We're just going to do this." And then laying ground rules, I think, can also be very important in establishing transparency. Well, when I say ground rules, I mean things like, hey, this is what we're allowing and what we're not allowing. Like, do we want to allow someone in the marriage to have a credit card that we see a balance on, but we don't see any of the transactions? Do we want someone to have that pile of cash sitting there and maybe it's unknown how big that is or whatever it is? Is that okay? And maybe in your marriage it is okay, but at least establish what those ground rules are.
Yeah, I was joking when I booed on the rules. Again, to me, this is like the expectation conversation.
Exactly.
You just need to make sure you're on the same page about how you're going to do it. Yeah, if you want to be able to stockpile cash or have these secrets, just be open about it. That's like how I feel in playing board games. I like to cheat at board games, but at least I'm open about it that, hey, I'm going to cheat. To me, then that's fine. It's out there. The expectation's been laid.
Yeah. And if you say you're going to cheat, then I'm just not playing.
On board games.
Then I'm just not playing with you. That's how it is. And then, as I'm sure you've no doubt already realized, this is really only an issue if you have merged finances, right? That's where it's mostly an issue. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be talking about it. Of course, you need to be talking about this merged or separate. You got to be talking about talking about this on a regular basis and setting these expectations. So you don't get a pass just because you're separate finances.
That's great. So time for you to practice a little transparency with your spouse. So we would like to challenge you to think about whether this is something you are doing. How often do you and your spouse actually talk about money? You should be talking also, not arguing. However, there might be some arguments, but we want you to be talking regularly as a couple. So start the conversation, start talking about the expectations and try to up your game on frequency. So David, where do you think we struggle the most with transparency around money in our marriage?
Ooh, okay. I think it's really around unplanned things. So now this is me probably getting to be a little bit petty.
It's about to get real in here, people. We saved the drama till the end.
Now, arguably, I'm being a bit petty, but I feel like every once in a while there's things where it's like, we might have run out and grabbed a coffee and hit it and threw it in the trash and I don't know. So, not a big deal. I'll admit, not a big deal. But it's like, okay, clearly there was something here that was trying to be hid from me, right? So that type of thing, not a big deal. So I would say this really isn't a huge issue in our marriage, which is maybe why I'm having a pretty easy time talking about this versus other topics, because I feel like we've been pretty transparent.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote down the same thing. I think I do struggle with being transparent on some of the small spending purchases that aren't in the plan. So if I go to Starbucks or if I want to go get a Blizzard at Dairy Queen, or even sometimes like if I have dinner out with a friend that wasn't planned. And most of the time I can use my pocket money, so you don't have to know what I'm doing. It doesn't matter. It's just coming out of my little cash pile. But on occasion, maybe I'll have a nice dinner with a friend that was not in the budget or planned. And I struggle to come clean on it and the price tag. But I think it causes more arguments by not coming out with it instead of waiting for budget committee. But I don't want to live a life where it's like, well, that wasn't in the budget to go have that dinner, but I know you're gonna hold me to the budget. So yeah, I think that's something we have to.
The budget's there for a reason.
To me, it's more of a guide. It's more of a principle than a rule. It's like accounting, being principle based versus rule based. It's like this is the concept we're trying to follow. We're not living by the laws, Just like how Jesus freed us from the laws, like we need to love each other. Follow.
So in your accounting, that's how you approach accounting: is you can be freed from the law.
It's principles, not rules.
You don't have to.
So I think we agree that we've got a little issue to work through there. So it's good.
But
I'm glad to hear it's my issue. It's good to know.
Oh gosh. Okay. I'm sure I am not perfect. I apologize. I am not doing a very good job.
No, you are perfect.
No, I am not perfect. I'm just.
That's why we're good on this podcast. I balance the
oh my
perfection
gosh,
of
that's
you
not true.
With the real person in the world.
That's not true. So we do have a question today from none other than our favorite listener, our favorite question answerer, I should say, or question asker, Jeannie.
Yay!
Jeannie's writing in again. Thank you for writing in again, Jeannie. Jeannie asks, and it's really a good question for this conversation. She asks, how does a person save money for their spouse's birthday present or special thoughtful gift? Where does that money come from? I'm not talking about a little $50 gift. What about a $200 to $500 gift? Ooh, that's a good question. Especially when we're talking about not hiding money. Right?
Now we're asking you to hide.
Now we're asking you to hide.
There are some times when it is good to hide.
Is this one of them?
I think so.
Okay.
Yes. So for me, if you can cash flow, even if it's $200 to $500, if you can cash flow it in the month, just do it and hope they don't see the transaction. Or you can take out some cash if you don't want them to see where you're buying it and purchase it. I think in this instance, it is okay to hide. However, if you do need to save for it and you have a budget and you have someone who's really strict on the budget, like my husband, I think that you can either, got a couple options. You can use your fund money and then have the family repay you because it shouldn't come out of your fund money. Or you can pull from your general savings account. Hopefully you have a little bit of, not your emergency fund, but hopefully you have like maybe a general savings account that you can pull from. I don't think you should let something get in your way of surprising your spouse. I think it's very awesome it's really nice to do a special present or a thoughtful gift. And as long as you have the money to pay for it, I think that it's okay to find ways to get around and to surprise them. David, your thoughts?
I think that's a really good answer. I was going to lead by saying I don't do this very well.
Yeah, you have a hard time surprising me.
I don't really surprise you. So the one time I really wanted to surprise Heather, I was buying her a tennis bracelet. And
which I'd always wanted.
She'd always wanted this thing. And I was like, oh, I'm going to surprise her with this. And so then, but it required me transferring money from another account. And then it required me making this purchase. And Heather's really good about watching what transactions happen on the bank account. And so she saw this large purchase go through and she didn't say anything about it, but she kind of knew. And anyway, the point is I'm kind of terrible at this. So maybe I'm the wrong person to give advice on this. But my suggestion would be to certainly, like Heather said, buy it as close to possible as the date that you want to give it to the person. If you're able to cash flow it, just so they can't see the transaction. And maybe at gift giving times, you agree you're just not going to be looking at those accounts,
right? And
you're not going to look at transfers that have to happen. And if you're doing some saving and you're pulling this out of your savings account, just agree. Yes, we're not going to be looking at those transactions during the month of December for Christmas or the month of your birthday or whatever that might be. Or like I said, I'm hesitant to say stash away cash, but I think in this one instance, this is probably an okay time to do that as well. So, yeah, I think that's a good answer. So I'll give myself a pat on the back for that, even though I'm not doing a very good job with you.
I'm glad
on
you
this.
approve of gifts for your surprise gifts for your spouse. That's a good.
I'm
glad
approve.
We're on the same page there.
So I think that about wraps up our conversation for today. We would love to hear how your conversations about money have gone or to take your questions on a future episode. You can email us at marriageandmoneypodcast@gmail.com or message us on Instagram at marriage.and.money. Also, please rate and review us on iTunes as that continues to help us reach more people. Thanks again for joining us this week, and remember that whether you're a spender or a saver, your best financial life lies somewhere in the middle.